We have one more speaker. I'll just let you all know that just 5 minutes before our session started this morning, the American College of Surgeons tweeted about a survey that indicates that social media usage is increasing among fellows of the American College of Surgeons. So I hope what you've learned today will help you continue to contribute to that increase. We'd like to end today. Danielle Walsh from East Carolina University is going to talk to us about social media policies and procedures. We'll end with the rules.
Thank you very much. I have nothing to disclose. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the legal issues that deal with social media. This may be a little bit of a downer for all of you that have gotten all excited about embracing social media. Please don't let it scare you off. You just do need to use the rules in order to do it safely. We're going to talk about some of the elements of creating your own social media policies and some of the legal issues to consider as you're using it. When you think about social media, as some of the other speakers have suggested, it's very important to separate what kind of communications you're putting out there. There's your personal postings that deal with your personal life, which should be separate from institutional communications. So I am not speaking for East Carolina University as I'm standing up here. And then there's my individual professional activities, which are when I'm speaking as Danielle Walsh, pediatric surgeon. And you want to try and keep all of those very clear and actually post disclosures about which of those hats you're wearing at the time that you make your posts. You want to be very careful not to friend patients, as we've talked about, to your personal accounts, direct them to your professional accounts or institutional accounts. You want to post on your professional account that this represents your personal views and your opinions, not necessarily that of the institution. Many of your institutions will have policies they want you to follow when you're creating your professional social media site, and most of the time just Googling or searching the website for your institution will very quickly bring up the policies related to it. But then just because the institution has their policies doesn't mean you don't need to create your own policies for your own site. So why do you need to have the policy? First is you want to be able to control your image, and you want to be able to you want to ensure that you can paste accurate information on there and correct any inaccuracies that are posted to your site. You also want to give guidance to employees that are working underneath you, your lab residents, your secretaries, the people rotating under you, to know when they can use social media and how they can post to your site and use it appropriately. And ideally, you want to mitigate any risk before a risk occurs, so that there's a policy in place for how you're going to handle it and be able to safely and competently and emotionally control yourself as you move through problems that can occur. How do you go about developing your own social media policy? First, you need to identify all the people that are going to be involved with this policy. Your IT department, if you have one, risk management of your employer and or your hospital, the legal department of your institution, privacy, if you have a privacy officer for your institution, and then the institutional leadership, and make sure that they have an opportunity to review what you're about to do and why you're doing it and give their feedback. It's a good idea to look at examples of policies from other institutions. This website that I've posted here, socialmediagovernance.com, has the social media policies for about 150 different organizations, including healthcare organizations on there. So there's templates. You do not have to reinvent the wheel because others have really done this for you. You want to decide who is going to have ultimate ownership and oversight of those sites. So once you set up that Facebook account, who's going to be following it, who's going to be responsible for correcting it, who's going to make sure that the content is okay. And if it's you, that's fine, but then you have to do it. If it's not you, you want to be sure that person has the appropriate access and set up a policy for how often they're going to check it and correct it. And then you got to actively train your employees on what the rules are. So when you do your annual training for HIPAA compliance and everything else, this may be part of your training. These are what the social media policies are for this group, and here's how to handle it. What do you need to include in that policy? Again, there's templates out there, but you certainly need to know who it applies to. Everyone that works in this office, everyone that rotates through this rotation, this applies to you. And designate that responsible person to go to if there's questions or issues. You want to know what kind of information and statements are going to be covered by the policy. So if it's a professional statement, it's covered by my professional policy. My personal statement shouldn't really involve my professional life, and those may not be separate. And you're going to have to identify for the people that are working for you what they can post professionally and what they can post personally. Where it applies. Does this apply to computers you're using at home? Does it apply to computers you're only using in the workplace? Is it okay for your people in your office to do their personal Facebook accounts from the computer that you own? Or is it going to apply only to professional accounts? You don't want them accessing their personal accounts during the workday. When to bring information to the top. So something appears on the site that is a threat of harm to anybody in the office or to a patient is threatening harm to themselves. If there's a complaint about your practice or a member of your team, what do they do when they notice that? And is there any violations of privacy that have appeared on the site that were out of your control? And then why that policy is important, that you're creating this because this is your guidelines and hopefully keep you out of a legal situation later on. So you've created your policy. What are some of the rules about engaging it? Well, we've all mentioned HIPAA. High-tech is sort of an extension of that. It also has rules and laws that control it, and we'll talk about some of those. Take all patient conversations offline if they deal with medical information. If they're saying, great, I'm excited that you spoke at SAGES, that's wonderful. If they say, hey, I'm having a problem with my stoma, can I see you in the office? That's not something you want to respond to online. You're going to immediately set up a policy for your staff that says, any patient issues, say, please call the office immediately. We look forward to serving you. Don't practice medicine online even if you know them. So if you set up your Facebook account and your cousin in another state sends you a message and says, hey, I'm supposed to have such and such done, what do you think about this surgically? Don't respond to them even though you know them. You don't want to be construed as practicing medicine in another state, and if they don't like the advice you get and they forward it and forward it and forward it to other relatives, pretty soon a lot of people have seen what you posted even though you only meant it for the one person who was asking you about it. So be very careful about your relatives and your family and your friends not posting information medically about them either. There was actually a post about this. What about HIPAA compliance for photographs and things? Honestly, you should just get consent for all photographs and video. If you want to include that in your packet of preoperative information, if it's not on your consent form already, just include a consent form that says, I understand that photographs and video will be taken and used in a non-identified fashion for education. And beware of geotagging. Geotagging is something that's done specifically on cell phones. So all of you that have an iPhone, every time you take a photograph or shoot a video on that, it's recording the longitude and latitude of where that was taken, as well as a timestamp of where it was taken. So if you take photographs and videos of patients with your cell phone and then transfer them to your computer and then post them, there are very astute people who can go backwards and identify what time you did that and where it was done, and could backtrack and identify the patient from that. Most regular cameras and video cameras do not geotag that. You can avoid it by turning off the location service on your phone itself. You can also, if you do go ahead and take that photograph or that video, even within Microsoft, there is software within there to be able to remove the geotag before you post it online, but it is something you want to think about, particularly if you didn't get an explicit consent for it. Protecting patient privacy. Don't assume that because they posted a medical question online that they are waiving their right to privacy. Again, take that conversation offline. The fact that they asked you online does not mean they want you to answer in a public forum. Leaving your name out is not the same as non-identifiable. If they know where you work and you describe a patient scenario, or if you post a photograph and a story about that person eventually hits the media and it includes your name, they can go back and put the pieces together and identify you. So be very careful about just saying, I didn't put the name there and so I'm not identifiable. If for any reason you do somehow accidentally get a breach notification, you accidentally have a patient who is identified in conversation or in a posting, there are rules through that HITECH Act about how you have to handle it. First, you have to notify all the individuals involved that there's been a violation. You actually have to notify the Health and Human Services Secretary with an online report. And if more than 500 people were involved in that breach notification, you're required to notify the media in your area. And that can create a big fuss for institutions. State laws are individual, and they can be above and beyond the federal laws, and this can impact your license, as some of the other people have pointed out. So when you're getting into this world of social media, it's important to identify what your state laws are, if any, concerning the posting of social media, especially in the healthcare setting. A word about physician-only sites. So SAGES has one, the ACS has one, there's other non-surgeon specific sites like CERMO out there, and physicians will sometimes be a little bit more cavalier about patient discussions and posting patient cases on these because they're billed as a physician-only site, but they're not quite as protected as you might think. A person can pretend to be a physician, sign up and get online, and they can take that information that you posted and repost it somewhere else. And it's very difficult to back up. The information you post, even though it's a physician-only site, can still be legally recoverable in a lawsuit. So I encourage you to use great care when you're posting to physician-only sites, even though they may seem more protected than your regular Facebook account. Beyond HIPAA rules, there are other rules you need to think of, and that's copyright. Just because the content is online does not mean that you can legally repost it if it's copyright protected. And you may need to write to the person who posted it and get their permission in order to repost it on your site. And if you do not do that and they decide to go after you, they can fine you for up to $150,000 per violation. So you post it and you get a fine of $1,500, and somebody else takes what you posted and reposts it in your name, you get another $1,500, and very quickly that can go up. Most companies haven't pursued this right now, but it's something to be aware of. Know the type of account you have and the terms of service and policies of the sites that you use. One of the questions that came up is, can I set up a personal Facebook account under a pseudonym, and that way nobody knows who it is and I just give my pseudonym to my families? Well, it's actually against the Facebook policies. You cannot use a false identity to set up a Facebook account. And that's where knowing the terms of service of the site that you're using will become important. Almost all of them, including Twitter, actually will allow you to set up a public and a private account. They're somewhat cumbersome though, so if you set up a private Twitter account, you have to actually manually go in and enter the names and the information of any person you want to see it. So very few people use it, but it is available. And then watch for policy updates on your sites. Just because you read the rules when you originally set up your account, they will send out these little emails that says a policy notice, and we tend to ignore them because it's sort of legal mumbo jumbo. But again, this is your reputation on the line, and you want to be sure to read it through once. All right. Other legal aspects. Can I access information about my patients? Probably not. It is just because they are your patient doesn't mean that you can go check them out. So you see John Doe and you know that he's a lawyer and he's come to see you to have a colectomy done. You cannot go online and search John Doe and find out about his background. That's probably not legal. They didn't give you permission to do that. It's on the web, but doctors are being held to a different standard in some ways, so be very careful about looking up your patients. Can I access information about potential employees, students, and residents? Yes, as long as you don't use that information to discriminate against a protected class. So somebody applies to your program as a resident. Can I go look on their Facebook page and see what kind of pictures they have posted and read what they've written about themselves and what other people are posting about? Absolutely, you can. But you can't then read about their religion and say, well, I'm not going to hire them because of that, or look at their race and see that they're a minority. There are protected classes, and those same protected classes that appear for verbal interviews and what you can ask in person apply to the Facebook information. Safety considerations. When you're setting up an account, be sure and choose a unique username so you can't duplicate what someone else has. And you have to make sure that identity is safe. It's something that you would want to put on a business card. So, you know, you want a descriptor, but probably something that's offensive to other people or tongue-in-cheek may not be the most professional thing to use. Be sure and obtain control of your account. Anyone who has your username or password can broadcast as you. So if you do give your account information to someone else, which is against the terms of service of some of these groups like Facebook, be careful because they are representing you. So your secretary may post as you and you've ticked them off one day and they're ready to leave you. They can leave some very damaging information. Watch for phishing scams. So once you set these up and you use your email address, you may find in your junk box an email that says, your Twitter account is out of date. Please fill out the following form and email to update. They don't usually send out those things. Those are phishing scams, and they're trying to get you to send them your username and your password so that they can do bad things with your account. So be very cautious if you think Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or one of the others has contacted you, because normally they don't do that. Ensure the security of the system that you're using, not only your hardware, but your software. If you use a portable device, be sure it has a password in order to get into it. It needs to be locked and able to enter only with difficulty and only by someone that you want to access it. This can get very tricky, particularly if you are getting into professional accounts and patient information. And sometimes it's better to actually hire a vendor or go to your IT department and have them look into the security of the software and the hardware that you're using. And one reference for looking into whether I'm secure or not is sophos.com. They'll have some information for you. Consider subscribing to a file backup service. So when you set up your account, normally all the tweets and postings are there for eternity, but if the organization or the company you're using changes their terms of service or decides that something illegal or unmoral or bad's happening with your account, they can cut you off at any time, and all of a sudden all the information that you've had posted there is gone. And so the more you use it, the more tweets and posts you have, the more you may want to hire or pay for a backup service in order to create or keep a backlog of what's been done and what you've posted and who responded to it. And there's a listing of some of the examples of backup services, and they're pretty cheap. Some of them are free, some of them are about, at most, $5 a month. So one of our questions was, who's creating policies about this and who's going to oversee how we manage these policies? The only major policy that's come out has been, at the national level, has been the AMAs that I could find. And the AMA did put one out on professional use of social media, and it says most of the things we've been talking about today. Protect patient policy and confidentiality, don't identify patients, use privacy settings, realize that whatever you post is permanent. It is very difficult to remove. Patients post bad things. You can very nicely ask the website if they'll remove them for you. Most of the time they're going to say no. Your better response is put a very nice, polite, carefully worded response saying, "We're sorry you had a bad experience. We would love to meet with you to discuss it," and leave it alone, because it's difficult to remove negative content. But you can overwhelm it with positive content or show that you cared and respond in a proactive way. You do need to monitor your own presence. People are creating accounts and information about you, whether you do it or not. So you can ignore all the things we're saying and not set up your own accounts, but realize your online identity exists without us. Google your name, I promise you're gonna find something there. So you can either contribute to this and police what's said about you and add to that information, or you can let everyone else do it for you, but you may not like what the others write about you, because again, it is often consumers and it is often negative. If you find, the AMA has added a few things. If colleagues post unprofessionally, they feel that we have a responsibility to bring it to the attention of our colleague, and if they won't address it, to bring it to other authorities. And then when they want us to recognize, not only does the action and content we post affect our reputation, but it can have consequences for your whole career and undermine public trust in the medical profession as a whole. So they're asking us to act professionally. Outside of that, there are national bodies that are trying to develop social media rules. So the FDA, the Federal Trade, Congress have all started proposing policies for the use of social media. But it's a very difficult thing for them to pin down. So the pharmaceutical agencies, the pharmaceutical companies have long-standingly wanted to use social media to push forward their medications, their devices, and get those out to the consumer. Because again, it's far more effective than that TV commercial. But they are aware that the FDA is going to have guidelines or rules about what's okay and what's not okay. So they've been very cautious about doing it for fear of breaking a rule that doesn't yet exist. The FDA is so slow about this that it took them 2 years to put out anything, and even that was a minimal amount. So the rules are still being written, but the government, at least in the US, is starting to address the issue of social media and what's going to be okay and not okay for physicians and medical professionals. There is a complete lack of case law about this. And part of the reason is that because there's no case law to start with, nobody wants to be the one that sets case law. So the majority of the lawsuits that deal with social media have never made it to trial. They get settled in advance because there's no price boundary out there, and they feel they could probably do better setting an arbitrary low price and getting out of court than going into a courtroom and risking a much higher financial settling. There are a few out there. So there are suits against hospitals itself because employee pasted on the MySpace page. Ultimately, the hospital determined, the court determined the hospital could not predict the employee was going to do it. Physicians and nurses have been fired for discussing patients in social media, and some of those went to the court, and the courts ruled that these are not protected under the First Amendment. So what you post may not be protected even if you try and invoke your First Amendment rules. What you say can be used against you. Employers and attorneys will search for information to use against you. So there was a physician who blogged anonymously about going through a lawsuit, and at trial they exposed his identity as the blogger. And even though the suit was public, some of the things that he described in the depositions and discussions with his lawyer were not. And so they felt they would have a possible loss of attorney-client privilege, and they had to settle the case. People are watching you, so government agencies are demanding passwords, and someday you may run into your employer asking for your password or asking you to access the site while you are there interviewing it. There are student athletes who are being asked to friend a coach so the coach can monitor their accounts for NCAA violations. And some of the softwares that can do this, Radian 6, Lithium, they're all out there. They're watching what you do. They're tracking under your name. They will, if your company subscribes to one of these services, they will give them a reputation score based on what you post on social media. They can warn them about any threats or HIPAA violations. And then finally, use good judgment. The appropriateness and the ethical concerns are important. Some medical students have been in trouble for posting pictures of cadavers. Medical students and residents in particular are known for using discriminatory and offensive language, and it can affect the institution's reputation. So in summary, separate your accounts, develop policies, educate yourself on the rules, police what's posted out there, and in the end, use good judgment because you are being watched. Thank you.